Hey, this is Steve Good on the Coin Chat with Yuri Cataldo, and we are joined today by a Holochain veteran, David Atkinson, the commercial director for Holochain. So, David, welcome to the Coin Chat.
Thank you very much, guys.
Great to have you. So David, I think we're excited about what Holochain's been doing. There's been a lot of news, about hype, a lot of excitement about the project, and we just wanted to dig in a little bit more and really get to know more about what Holochain's been doing, especially since the ICO itself, which you guys finished in April 2018, raising 20 million. So maybe to start.
Wait, actually, David. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, before you do that, could you just, for our listeners who are less familiar with your project, how would you describe what Holochain does and is? Sure.
Okay. So you've just asked me the 30-minute question. And
right.
I will.
Well, we told you we were going to ask easy questions today, but we had to start with the hardest one first.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I think the simplest way to think about Holochain, there's a couple of different levels. Is when we're usually thinking about a blockchain-style project, we're thinking about a protocol by which a number of nodes need to agree on their version of the state of truth, which we call consensus. And we might have complete consensus, we might have sharded consensus, but effectively that is the mechanism by which we can move to this trustless computing environment. Holochain says, well, actually, let's take this problem and look at it a little bit differently. So what we say is actually we've built an application framework to build distributed applications upon. Right? And so having an application framework, and then by separating out the currency layer from the technology layer, and by introducing this idea of agent centricity, Holochain effectively allows you to build distributed applications without having to have global consensus. So it's an open source distributed application software, but it means that you can build distributed apps in a trustless environment, so you don't have to control or own the nodes rather than just in a trusted environment. So that innovation has been brewing for a while, and our commitment to the community was that we built an alpha of Holochain before we'd done the fundraising, and that we will build Holochain as an open source initiative. And to meet this commitment, we then designed Holo. Right? And so Holo is a world that says not everybody is going to be able to run a Holochain node. Like Steve, I think the common example of like, what is my grandma going to be able to do with her crypto wallet or on an exchange?
For sure.
Maybe a lot of damage. Well, on a Holochain, we're saying, well, do you know what? Grandma isn't going to run a Holochain node today.
She's not?
But she still knows how to browse the web.
How am I going to break the news to my grandma that she's not going
to
run a node? Sorry, Grandma, no nodes for you. Are you still
in control of it? Exactly. You're in control of her wallet and her keys, are you?
No.
Yeah.
Totally is.
So, yeah.
So what we built was Holo. And Holo is a distributed hosting application. It's built on top of Holochain, and it's kind of the first major Holochain application. And Holo has two things. So it has a currency called HoloFuel, which I won't get into, but you can look at the white paper or ask me any questions if you want in the future. And it has this actual application, which allows anybody to access a distributed application through a web browser or through an app without me even knowing they're running a distributed application. So when you combine the power of this completely peer-to-peer this application framework with a distributed hosting environment, you get a world that feels like the internet today, but powered by what we will power the internet of tomorrow.
So in the Holochain environment, you have these agents, right, that are effectively what the apps connect to, and the agents are what are effectively driving the consensus for the applications to run. Is that a correct way of saying it?
Yeah, look, Holochain it's a multi-agent system. So
Right.
what we say is that, and there's a comparisons I think that the viewers can read about the difference between agent centricity and data centricity. Uh, agent centricity mimics natural systems patterns, which says there's no absolute truth. There's just everybody's version of the truth.
Yep.
And so what we've designed is then a system where various people, actors, agents, if you will, on an application speak. That could be could be a transaction, it could be typing, it could be any form of exchange.
Right.
And what we say is what needs to happen for any interaction to be valid is that, say, Steve, you and I are creating some kind of exchange. What is required is that I initiate, you receive, we countersign, and we're saying that parties are playing by the rules of the application at that time.
So
then, depending on the application, there's validation. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, I was gonna. So the reason I was asking about that is that typically in, if I think of consensus in the decentralized environment, a Bitcoin block, blockchain, Ethereum kind of environment, then the entire world of computers are all working on the same blockchain block at the same time and validating that block, and it's such that it's very hard to get a 51% attack because it's distributed so well or decentralized. So what I'm wondering about, and this is something that wasn't evident, 100% evident from reading through all your materials and talking to people, and this is why I just wanted to ask this, is how do you prevent that kind of 51% attack at the agent level when it's an application that's just verifying with a single agent and you don't have that verification process occurring across or is there some sort of multi-node type verification that occurs at the app transaction level?
Yep. So, yeah, actually, so we spoke about this a little on the AMA last week.
Right.
One of the major differences is because we're not trying to achieve a global consensus, then you're never going to be able to attack 51% of the network to start with, because the transactions are just occurring between the transacting parties and whatever rules the application sets for validating those transactions. So you might say that an application might require consensus, full consensus for all nodes running that application. But that is just that application. That is not the entirety of the applications running on the architecture.
Because you're isolating everything down to each individual application one by one. So even if someone tries to attack the Holochain network, it'd be irrelevant because it's actually an agent-centric model where all the agents are communicating with one another and each agent is working with a specific app. So it's a peer-to-peer relationship. So you'd have to go and attack that specific application only to do damage. So if I decided to go and attack that app, how do you protect that app from being attacked such that if it was a banking transaction or a social media transaction, how do you do it so that it doesn't get interrupted then if it's at the app level?
For example, from a 51% attack?
Yeah, as an example, or some sort of, there's lots of different ways of attacking systems nowadays. I just wondered whether there's any kind of, because if you keep going down to the lowest level of detail, which in this case is at the app level, then the app is what needs to be the most secure. And of course, if people tried to attack the app by having multiple people using the same app, and I'll try to throw in bad data, is there a way that you could disrupt at the app to agent level, or is that something that's probably not likely to occur because of the way it's designed?
Exactly. So the technical guys will definitely be incredibly unhappy with the answer that I give here. So apologize for. Well,
we can have them come on the show the next time and give us the technical answer, and we'll just be bewildered, which is fine. We're not techies either.
The thing is,
I apologize in advance to David's responses on anything technical.
Exactly.
Disclaimer at the bottom.
Exactly. It comes down to, again, the way a transaction is designed within Holochain, you would have to attack at the creation of transaction level, or then attack the agent, because the consensus then, however it is achieved, or whatever forms of validation, is a clear way of describing it in a Holochain application. It's propagated over a period of time across all of the nodes, because the key is to understand that transaction at that time happened in accordance with the rules of the application and was valid. So you can set whatever validation rules you want on the transaction. But a lot of the time it's payments. We're really saying, Steve, do you have the money that you say you have in your wallet? And David, do you have the thing that you're giving in exchange for the money? If so, make the transaction. Validation occurs, test the rules that were applied, test the validation, so test the validity of the transaction. And so the attacks would really have to come at the agent level. So there's definitely opportunity for things like malicious actors, either at the creating the transaction or in terms of validation. And that's where we've built in a warrant system. And effectively, like Holochain, especially through Holo, we're saying we're not interested in anonymous interaction. So when we're thinking about the way, there's plenty of amazing solutions for anonymous payments and anonymous transactions. And Holo is saying, well, actually, there's also a world where we want to be who we are, and based on our identity, receive increased reputation, receive benefits in terms of credit, etc., in distributed applications. So one of the ways we're addressing things like bad actors through a warrant system is by connecting your ability to have impact, grow businesses, and build reputation on the system. Well, you've actually got a reputation to manage and uphold, and that's all built into Holochain. So identity is a foundational piece of thinking in Holochain rather than a bolt-on.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up, because actually one of the other things that I understand is you have this sort of proof of service model. I think that's what you were alluding to just now. Is that right?
Yeah, partially. So
basically, where you give rewards to people based on their participation, and it's not about someone participating, but how much response they get for that participation. Is that the right way of expressing it?
Yeah, the simplest way is like we're rewarding value-added work, and so the way proof of service works. Remember, this is all on Holo. Right. Holochain is just open source distributed application framework. Right. So it doesn't. But in the hosting environment, we have to reward the hosts who serve applications to end users that don't want to run Holochain through a web browser. So what happens is an application will be running, and instead of spending their money on Azure or Amazon Web Services or some other application hosting, they will say, okay, we want to host through Holo. And so they will pay, say, $100 a month for their hosting. And every time there's a request from a user, a host will meet that request. The $100 that was paid by the application, which is held on reserve, will then be distributed through HoloFuel, which is the micropayment currency that powers the Holo network, to the host that was providing the hosting. So it's like web hosting, except it's fully distributed web hosting. And obviously all of these nodes that are running Holo aren't within our organization. It's pure edge computing solution. So what we're rewarding is the service of meeting the request that a user made for information to be passed through a web browser. The host met that request, and so they receive a micropayment. So the service is hosting effectively, and Holo Network provides.
So you're rewarding the service that's running, not the people that are participating.
Absolutely. We're rewarding the services running, and it's for meaningful work. It's not for managing the network. It is for providing the service that the end user requests of the network. And so it's compute power.
I'm going to flip this around, because I always try to think about how does one scam this, or how does one game this, right? So I'm thinking the other way around. So you put the service up, and now I'm going to game this. So I'm going to go get a bunch of people to go and use the service and vote. And it's the best service ever. So I'm getting rewarded more than I should. How do you prevent that?
Well, it's probably incentives are more clearly aligned for within Holo than a lot of the other protocols out there. Because firstly, gaming Holo, they're gaming an application that's running on top of Holo. And so say it's an application that involves voting. It's going to be in the application's interest to work out how to manage user activity, so that that they don't spend their $100 a month in the first hour having a host or somebody game the system.
Right, I got it. Right, makes sense. Cool. Yeah. How interesting.
So it's really so the technology is built to power a new internet, and one of the most important things is getting the architectural layers right, both technology and the currency layers. But most importantly, it is to design with the social in mind. So like, I'd love to, on or another time, explore all of the different gaming scenarios, and also the different social outcomes, because we've really tried to have within our design think about how do people actually behave, and what motivates and incentivizes people.
Sure.
And it's not enough to just say, oh, the technology will prevent centralization, because we know centralization happens socially as much as technically. So we need to be able to design social architectures as well into these kind of systems to be able to meet the needs that people have.
Amazing.
Yeah. Cool. How are you incentivizing then people to join the ecosystem? Or are you, I guess?
Yes, again, on the last day of May, or second to the last day of May, I think we said we're not paying people, and there's really there's a really clear reason why you shouldn't be paying people to build on these protocols, because the businesses, they're not ready.
Right.
You really want bootstrap businesses that have a great business models meeting customer needs, or you want businesses with existing customer bases that have a real need for distributed systems to be moving over. And for us, what we're looking for are a few different things, but we're looking for people with amazing passion to want to build applications that really shape an industry or shape and create a new ways of thinking, being able to build new kind of patterns based on Holochain. That's one, but their motivations are all intrinsic, right? Because they've been looking for this tech for years, and if we can build the tech that they've been looking for, then they're going to find us. And really it comes down to, in the same approach to any different segment, we're really looking to find what's deeply motivating for people. How can we partner to be able to design and implement the best possible solutions? But initial users, just it doesn't make sense to us to fund an ecosystem that isn't based on really, really strong foundations.
How interesting. Cool. It's great to hear that, to be honest. I think a lot of people will appreciate hearing that, because I think we want more, down to earth, grounded projects that are focused on the reality, which is building a business. So I've got kind of two business questions for you that kind of come off of that. The first being, so you've got a foundational system that's there. How are you finding it in terms of getting apps to build, companies to build their apps on there? I mean, that's hard to find on your website and looking online in the internet. Are you able to give any examples of projects that are already up and running, or is it still kind of an early stage development?
So we're moving very close to our testnet, where we're going to have a closed alpha and then an open alpha. We do have one project, hum.earth, that have actually, before Holo even existed, served a WordPress equivalent with a distributed hosting solution that you can access online right now. Anytime there's sort of 50 to 100 applications in various levels of development, and very active developer community as well that we're supporting. But really the key milestones are to have a successful testnet and then be opening up increasingly. And I think that's when we'll be looking to really scale the number of applications that are building.
And that's when it'll be really interesting to get you back on the show to tell us about what's really going on with these apps and what they're delivering and the value they're bringing to users, and even maybe bringing one of those apps on the show so we can tell people, if they want to check the app out, this is where they can go to check it out. So
absolutely. That would be fantastic.
Really, that's really interesting for me.
And for people listening, one thing to just think of when you're thinking about a Holochain application is application design is modular and really relies on microservices. So, for example, we have a chat application that's running on Holochain at the moment. Now, the same functionality can also be run for comments on a blog. So what we've got with Holochain is your ability to plug and play various microservices or small components means that you should be able to build out your application many, many times faster, that you can build like a lot of even centralized applications. That's a core part of our design and why we think that centralized users will eventually, or centralized application developers will eventually switch over to Holochain. So
Right.
yeah, definitely we'll come on and we'll bring, we profile a different project. We just started with the first project, Junto, last week or the week before, and then we're profiling a different project every 2 or 3 weeks across our community. Love to bring a project on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So the second question that I had, and then I think Yuri, you looked like you wanted to ask something. So the second question I had was really more about the financial side of the business, which is not the 20 million that you raised, but actually what's the economic model for how the company will, monetize and operate and run. And the reason I ask that is because I think a lot of people that when they're listening and watching the show are usually asking, are these projects going to survive, or are they just going to run out of money? And how do they actually turn from, great idea and a dreamer perspective into reality? So what we're trying to do is give people, and hopefully everyone listening in will be happy to hear that we're asking this, because I know a lot of people have asked this, to us quietly, privately. So could you just give us a little bit of an indication in terms of what your monetization model looks like, some of the different things you're trying to do to generate revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I think there's 2 parts to that question that I'll talk to. One is the treasury management side, and that's something, again, like we see a lot on Telegram. What's this project doing with treasury? Didn't need to worry about in 2017. It's a big deal in 2019.
Yeah.
So on the treasury side, we're working to a 5-year plan that we've put in place, and that is independent from some of the revenue opportunities that I'll talk to you about in a sec, right? Because it's good corporate practice to separate and have worst case on the cost side.
Absolutely.
And then start building out for best case as you think about the future opportunities.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the business opportunities, it's important to understand a little bit the design of HoloFuel. HoloFuel is the micropayment currency that powers Holo, right? And HoloFuel has been designed to be backed by effectively the asset of distributed hosting. And it's a little bit different in that it's a mutual credit currency. Mutual credit means that unlike a lot of the fixed supply designs that we see today, mutual credit allows you to do variable supply. And so you're using supply to manage demand rather than price, which you use fixed supply economy.
Mm-hmm.
This is when it starts getting interesting, is when you commoditize a very, very profitable industry. So we can all think about the example of Airbnb and what Airbnb has done to housing industry.
Mm-hmm.
It's effectively taken, I don't know the figures, but enormous amount of revenue and profits and taken them away from hotel chains and individual hotels, distributed some to people, large amount, and distributed brought an enormous amount to Airbnb. With Holo, what we've looked at and said the computing, the hosting world is very similar. So Amazon's biggest cash cow being Amazon Web Services, incredibly fast growing market, ripe for exactly the same disruption that Airbnb has provided for housing. So what we've done is we've sort of said, okay, well, we've benchmarked, what if Ethereum, who's supposed to be this kind of distributed computing, what if Ethereum tried to disrupt Amazon Web Services? What would the price of hosting be? And our benchmark was 10,000 times better than at the ICO, 10,000 times better than Ethereum could provide, because obviously at Ethereum's rate of distributed hosting, no one could ever run distributed hosting or buy it, but it seemed like a good benchmark. And so this sets our initial price. And so anyone who's pre-purchased hosting credits, which is what the ICO was, could buy hosting on the Holo network at that price.
Mm-hmm.
But as the efficiency of the network goes, and I think we've been quoted as saying it could increase, the efficiency could increase 100,000 to 1 million times because the architecture I've described earlier is infinitely scalable. Then someone who bought a unit of hosting a year before now suddenly gets 100,000 times the hosting power for that unit than they initially purchased. Right? That's increases. So equally, like we all know, there's enormous risk with any of these projects, and we may not be able to deliver on these promises, but it's interestingly, it's not a price-based promise. It's a promise to say you received a unit of hosting, and now this is what your unit of hosting, this is the hosting power it can now provide you. Wow. So the incentive mechanism for people who've been contributing early on, whether that's providing the hosting, whether that was participating in fundraising, is to pre-purchase hosting credits at a particular rate, and based on the benchmarks we set for at that time, the current performance of the network. So that might illustrate to you some of the incentive design and the currency design of HoloFuel.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about, as I know there's a lot of talk about potential partnerships and that kind of stuff, and could you talk about what kind of your goals are for 2019 and some new things that the listeners could potentially see that you actually can talk about?
So I think what people should expect are the increasing communications and clear communications from the project, and that is around development, that is around the way the organization is operating, and that is moving then into community and celebrating the amazing online and offline community that we're building in different countries around the world, whether that's developers, people wanting to be close to the project, and then also to the ecosystem. In terms of announcements that people can expect, whether it's partnerships, etc., I think we have taken a slightly different tack to other projects, and partly that's just designed to, we really want to build something that has enormous utility for the world, and so we haven't spent too much energy on some of the exploratory kind of partnership relationships that sounds fantastic. So let's say Apple is building X on Holochain, because generally they're going to be the R&D teams exploring and experimenting with some new technology. And frankly, until we get to mainnet and have things tested and pulled apart, well, not really going to be ready for the kind of partnerships that I think the crypto world really, really gets excited about. So it's just going to be the same. Lots of talks with lots of people, building the fundamentals, and then, as the incentives align and people see this as a technology that really their business can change around, or people say, I want to build new businesses on this technology because it's going to make a radical difference, then we'll be ready.
Yeah, so on your homepage, in fact, there's two really interesting videos. One is from another well-respected crypto project, Leica. Are you doing anything with them, or was this more of just like a technical proof of concept?
Yeah, the technical proof of concept, and then the other thing that we've often showed videos of people who are very aligned philosophically with the project as well.
Right.
Because it takes a bunch of, like we've talked about on this call, there's a few mental shifts that you need to make Holochain to make sense. So when people have made those mental shifts, they end up being big supporters of the project and often will publicly validate what we're doing.
Which is, I think, what you're alluding to with your friends at Mozilla, which was the other interview, very interesting one. And of course, we're not going to, beat around the bush about this, because there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of news about that. And of course, him being there just kind of fuels more rumors that there's something else going on. And I'm sure there's probably not much you can tell us, but is there anything that you can tell us about the relationship with Mozilla?
No, not really. Just exactly as we've said many times before. I think as it says on the website, that there's philosophical alignment, and this kind of architecture makes enormous sense for where distributed web needs to go.
So could we imagine a world, and we're just playing imagination now because I've got kids. So you've got kids, I've got kids, and Yuri will someday have kids. So if we play the imagination game, could we imagine a world where maybe Firefox was a distributed app, as an example, in the Holochain universe? Would that be a potential thing that we could see happen? Not saying it would be Mozilla and Firefox, just as an example. Is that the kind of thing that you would be aiming to do as a company, to take existing companies that are more centralized apps and distribute them in that way?
Well, yeah, we'd be hoping that our ecosystem, there's many browsers at different stages of development that would really, really like to be running on top of Holochain. I mean, we've already had a distributed Twitter up and running internally for about a year. You know, distributed chat is being built and played around with. So distributed Slack, something we've talked about many times. So yeah, this distributed web browsing is something that we see as like fundamental to building a new internet.
And if you could have like the partnership with any company in the world, who would you guys like to have a partnership with? Didn't see that question coming, did you?
What a great question.
Commercial director. Every commercial director has like their target list of people they want to build relationships with, and you might not want to tell us that, but I thought let's go a little blue sky here and just ask. What, I'm buying you time to think here.
No, yeah, thank you very much. There's a couple of ways to answer that. So the ideal partnerships are actually really boring, right? Unfortunately, because when we're thinking about distributed hosting, the ideal partnerships are those partnerships that increase the breadth or the scale of distributed hosting ecosystem that we're building, right? So I spend a lot of time thinking about those kind of projects and those businesses and how we could partner. As for an application, there's on a personal level, something around healthcare would be amazing. I think I don't know if it's just personal ownership of medical records and how I could see that powered by a Holochain, but something in that area. I think we're ready for a step change in medicine. As a societal level. I don't think the technology within medicine is ready for that step change.
Well, I'll tell you something. We're going to have an offline conversation about this. I might have a company worth talking to that has been building a medical app around records management and trying to figure out how to do peer-to-peer and expand it. So let's have that chat offline. And that might be who our next guest is with you guys. Who knows? But let's give it a go. And I'll tell you offline about this because obviously we're just having this conversation here together. But I love the idea of what you're saying about medical records and beyond, because the medical profession is seriously ripe for some form of change. And I love the blue sky thinking that we've just had here just talking about this. I think it's brilliant. I love it.
A couple of others, just definitely distributed energy and energy accounting. Stuff around satellites and space is always interesting. And because Holochain is asynchronous, then there's a lot that you could do there. Stuff around disaster relief is pretty exciting to me. And the most boring one, but the thing that gets me most excited is the app that someone builds that has 1 million users that we never conceived of. And that's actually my vision. That's where you lay the foundations and you create something that people build stuff that you never would have imagined.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
That's really cool. How did you just completely on a side note here, because I think we've covered a lot about Holochain, and obviously you're not going to tell us anything else about Mozilla. So how did you get...
got no other questions?
No, there's other questions.
Like all its questions.
I mean, people keep bugging us to ask you, so we're going to keep asking. No. Now, how did you get into all of this in the first place? I mean, what was your background that led you into Holochain, and how did you end up getting connected with the guys?
In early 2017, a guy named Trevor Hilder, who taught me the viable systems model, because previously I was the chief operating officer at a company called MindGym. And so we'd gone through huge growth, and I'd learned a massive amount of MindGym, growing and scaling a company, doing a turnaround, all of those kind of things. And about halfway through my time there, I got really stuck with how to run a business. And I looked at a whole bunch of different models and MBAs and everything. And I just, nothing really worked for me. Anyway, I did some research and came across this thing called the viable systems model. And it seemed pretty interesting. A crazy guy called Stafford Beer had run the Chilean economy off it for a year in the 70s, hadn't turned out so well. I was like, a holistic model for running an economy, and never heard about it. Okay, I've got to learn more about this. So I contacted this guy called Trevor. He taught me, amazing guy, taught me a huge amount. Really got to the stage where I could do my job in a fraction of the time that I'd been doing it a year previously from the insights that he shared. And the model's interesting because it's based on management cybernetics, which has also led to AI. But on a human level, we haven't really learned to apply cybernetic principles to how we work together. So Trevor told me a bunch about this. One day he just called me up and said, David, I've seen the new internet and we have to get involved. And so he taught me everything that I knew about viable systems. I just followed. And that led to a meeting with Art and Eric at the early days of, like, we've been building this stuff and thinking about it for a long time. We're thinking about, moving into the crypto world and releasing Holochain. Let's get to know each other.
Amazing. Very cool.
Wow.
Very cool. Anything else you want to ask, David, before we...
No, I don't think so. You've been very generous with your time. So thank you so much, David. This has been great.
Yeah, David, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to leave? Any parting messages to the listeners about where to find? Actually, so of course, we'll put all the links down below for the Holochain website, but are there any other links that you want to refer people to, or?
Definitely join the Telegram community. It's a very active community, and also there's two communities. Get involved because the community is just taking so much initiative and ownership of the evolution of the project. And for devs, join Mattermost, but you can find all of those through Telegram. And just encourage you to read more, learn more, get in touch, ask questions, and see what you think.
And Telegram is the best place to find you guys in terms of, like, the group communities?
It's the easiest. The central Telegram channel, I think it's called Channel Holo, is the easiest way to ask questions and then distributed to the right place.
Great. Well, David, thank you very much for taking the time out today. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've really enjoyed this, and we'll certainly be in touch to have some follow-on discussions when we've got some of those projects that we can highlight and showcase, because I think that'll be really interesting. So thanks to all of our listeners and subscribers for listening in. Don't forget to give us a like or subscribe on the way out if you haven't already, because we always like that. To the moon. Until next time.